Her mother abandoned her just after giving birth in the Netherlands, leaving her with an aunt. Little Isabella, along with two other children of Queen Joanna and Prince Philip of Burgundy, became something of a hostage to their family. This was the plan devised by their father. He couldn't claim the Castilian crown that his wife had gone after, but he intended to secure a high position by blackmailing Joanna with the children. Surely, she wouldn't refuse to crown her husband when her two daughters and son were fully in the hands of the Habsburgs. But things turned out quite differently. Princess Isabella was born on July 18, 1501, in Brussels, and almost immediately became an orphan. Her parents left for Spain to claim the throne, but her father soon died, and her mother was declared insane and locked away in a fortress. Now the rights to the throne belonged to Isabella's brother, and she herself held little value to her relatives, so she was treated accordingly. Her aunt, Margaret of Austria, ensured that the girl received an education in reading, languages, and basic skills, but Isabella received neither warmth nor genuine care from this woman. It was during those years that the girl learned to hide her feelings and endure hardships with resilience. Her sister Eleonora was destined to grow into an incredible beauty, yet for some reason, it was Isabella who became the first to be courted. She caught the eye of Christian II, recently proclaimed King of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. The only thing known about her future husband was that he was 20 years older than Isabella and had been sent in childhood to be educated by a common burgher, who ultimately failed to manage the unruly temperament of his pupil. Isabella wasn't even provided with a portrait of her intended spouse. Why bother with such details? Their marriage took place by proxy. On July 11, 1514, a grand ceremonial event was held. Since the groom was absent, not an uncommon occurrence at that time, he was represented by the princess's grandfather, Emperor Maximilian I. Before the altar stood granddaughter and grandfather, dutifully repeating the words of the ancient vow. Immediately after this, preparations for the journey began. But suddenly, it became clear that the dowry wasn't ready. Negotiations were dragging on between Isabella's brother, Emperor Charles V, and the new relative. Everything was settled roughly a year later, and accompanied by a Norwegian clergyman, Isabella Habsburg was brought to Copenhagen. There, a second, official wedding took place on August 12, 1515. The newlyweds attended a feast, and then each retired to their own chambers. Although Isabella was already 14 years old, a perfectly acceptable age for marriage at the time, her husband did not rush to fulfill his marital duties. In fact, he was quite content with his mistress, De Wijk. This beautiful Dutchwoman had been by Christian's side for 8 years, and even with the arrival of his legal wife, Isabella, she had no intention of leaving the royal palace. They lived side by side, the Queen Isabella and the daughter of a commoner. When they crossed paths in the palace corridors or gardens, at ceremonies or feasts, De Wijk would casually greet her lady, while Isabella, who was clearly being disrespected, did not hint at how much it irritated her. Her resilience and patience came in handy once again. However, not everyone in Isabella's circle was so tolerant. Angry letters flew to the emperor, complaining about King Christian's disregard for his wife, the arrogance of the royal mistress, and the angelic behavior of the queen. Naturally, Charles V was furious. He sent equally fiery messages to Christian, demanding the immediate exile of De Wijk, urging a change in attitude toward Isabella, and insisting that such a situation was unacceptable in the future. Yet Christian, who had proven impossible to control in his childhood, tossed Charles's letters into the fireplace. In his own realm, he dictated his own rules. Everything remained as it was until, in the year 1517, the lovely De Wijk suddenly fell ill and died. The king suspected foul play. An investigation was launched, but it led nowhere. It was only natural that De Wijk was thought to have been poisoned. However, Christian soon cooled down and, surprisingly, began to treat his wife differently. In 1518, Isabella gave birth to their first child, and she would go on to have 5 more. A semblance of peace settled over Copenhagen. Christian's political situation, however, was dire. His authoritarian rule and excessive cruelty toward his opponents alienated more and more people. A near-revolutionary atmosphere developed, prompting the Danish king to urgently write to Charles V. Christian pleaded for military assistance, which the emperor had promised him when they forged the alliance with Isabella. Unfortunately for Christian, Charles was preoccupied with his own military campaigns at the time, which were not going particularly well. Thus, in the year 1523, left without external support and having lost all respect within his own kingdom, Christian II was overthrown and fled the country. The throne was taken by the king's uncle, who was not particularly bloodthirsty. He offered Isabella and her children a comfortable life in Copenhagen, but the queen unexpectedly declined, stating, "Where my king is, there is my kingdom." With that, Isabella chose to follow her husband into exile. Christian still hoped to reclaim his throne, finding solace in the sermons of Luther. A fervent Catholic, Emperor Charles was infuriated by the former Danish king's association with a heretic, leading him to drastically reduce the support for the exiled family. To survive in Liège, Christian's family sold not only the jewels they had brought from Copenhagen, but even the children's toys. This ordeal proved too much for Isabella. She could endure her own suffering, but the pain of her children tormented her. Overcome with anguish, Isabella fell ill and died at the young age of 24. Only 2 of Isabella and Christian's 6 children lived to adulthood. Dorothea became the wife of the Elector Palatine, and Christina became the Duchess of Milan. As for the deposed king, he managed to return to Denmark, but only as a prisoner. But that is a different story. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos.